Sword Art Online Alicization Lycoris' first free DLC, Ancient Apostles Chapter 1 Reaper of the Woods, arrived this Friday, and this is a quick short impressions video on the entire content of the free DLC. I will have a separate video tomorrow on the news we got regarding future content, but if you want to check them all now, I'll link our coverage of the news on SAO Wiki at Twitter in the description. But let's start with Reaper of the Woods. Now, as promised, this is quite a short free story update featuring a nice little story and no significant gameplay changes, if at all. So if you are in that top 1% of players who have done the EX raids already and are jumping into this new content with dual wielding 2+5 Skyrens, you'll not be getting more than 2 to 3 hours of playtime from this update, including the story. If you're not part of that 1% of hardcore players, there is a lot for you to accomplish here, as the difficulty of this free update is very obviously aimed at getting you more powerful. With the content available in this update, you'll probably be able to solo attempt the normal mode raids without having to have someone carry you on multiplayer. The easiest way to put this is, the update comes with a neat little story for everyone and comes with additional ways to power up for casual players to bridge the power gap between them and the raids themselves. So let's start with the story and presentation. First off, we no longer have still 2D sprites. The update implemented live 2D into the visual novel scenes. At first glance, it will feel a little weird, maybe a little jarring, especially if you're not used to live 2D from some other games you play, but give it a couple minutes without immediately calling it weird and your brain will just adjust, no problems. In my opinion, the live 2D is implemented greatly and was a much needed addition to the SAO console games for some time now. However, what really struck me was that the gallery images, which we got 2 of in this free update, also are live 2D and they both look amazing as well. They could have maybe had the characters not move so much non-stop, which is, I believe, where the initial weirdness comes from. The sprite is on a constantly fluid motion, which is not exactly how we move in real life, let alone what our minds are used to in moving anime content. Something like Alicization Rising Steel's live 2D would be a good example of what I mean. Things like still having slight movements, mostly in sync with what you'd expect from just breathing of those characters, rather than the unnatural and fluid, constantly swaying motion these Lycoris sprites have. As for the story itself, I have to say I certainly like it better than the Warriors of the Sky free update Hollow Realization had. It's a compact story that led to all these "why is this DLC so short?" but this was also the case in all the free story updates in previous games. Warriors of the Sky had only a short beginning and a very short ending that teased the masked NPC, so the actual story itself was not longer than a couple minutes long, but the area itself was so large back in Hollow Realization that you were constantly doing busy work in a place where a narrative did not actually exist. Same with Mask of the Abyss in Fatal Bullet. You basically had to go through 10 floors of the Abyss dungeon just to get a small cutscene with absolutely nothing until that point. At least in this update, we're not doing any busy work that doesn't even have anything to do with the story. It's simple. The story is about a Reaper beast and a maiden. You defeat the 2 bodies of the maiden and then go defeat the Reaper. The gameplay portion does not turn into a slog that overstays its welcome, because not only it is directly tied to the story at hand, but also does not make you feel like you are just doing meaningless busy work on repeat. The story itself is completely isolated, so it has a beginning and an end. It does say to be continued at the end of it, because these 4 free story updates are supposed to tie into the second, currently unnamed paid DLC, but at the end of Reaper, you certainly don't feel like you need to play that second paid DLC to get any kind of answers. Like, I actually mean it. The Reaper of the Woods ends with a full stop to its little story, no cliffhangers at the end of it. I imagine how these little stories will tie into the second paid DLC is that we are simply collecting these divine objects that will be relevant tools in there. There's also the phenomenal voice acting done by Yoshitsugu Matsuoka and Miyuki Sawashiro as Kirito and Sinon, of course, one of the main reasons I'm glad we switched to live 2D sprites in this DLC. Honestly, this much effort going into the voice acting would end up being really awkward if we only had the usual fixed 2D sprites. Live 2D just makes it all the better with a little bit of movement involved. Coming over to the post-story content, however, as mentioned at the beginning of the video, the difficulty of the free DLC is very obviously aimed at casual players in an attempt to get them to power up and challenge the currently available raid content, as in, the content of the free DLC is easier than the normal raids, and it's kind of intended that way, which means if you're a seasoned player already, you won't have much to do after finishing the story, whereas if you're a casual player, this content will act as a massive gateway into your first raid experience. First major thing is that the level cap has been increased to level 70, which also comes as a great benefit for those who have been finding it extremely challenging to take on EX raid due to the accuracy debuff situation due to being severely underleveled. This level up not only allows a smoother power curve for casual players into normal raids, but also makes hardcore players more potent against stupidly overleveled EX raid bosses. If you are part of the 0.00001% who can already defeat those in 20 seconds, you probably should not expect any challenge from any content in this game, to be honest, at this point, and that is not on the developers, that's just how power scaling works. You have scaled so far up that there won't be any content that will challenge you at this point. Aside from the level cap increase, the weapon and armor enhancement caps are increased as well, giving you higher stats on your weapons, again making hardcore content more accessible to everyone. The way you take advantage of the increased enhancement cap, however, is extremely repetitive and artificially extended. The new boss type is the Mutated Beast, which drops the new enhancement materials to take your weapons and armor from +5 to +10 enhancement level. However, the drop amount is quite little for each run, and all Mutated Beasts are not available at once. At the time of this video, the one-handed sword beast is available, featuring materials to upgrade your one-handed swords and one-handed swords only. In 2 weeks, this boss will go away and give place to the new boss for upgrading armor instead. This system is just incredibly frustrating, having to wait 2 weeks to be able to upgrade armor, at which point you will no longer be able to farm one-handed sword materials anymore and have to wait for that specific boss to return. This is obviously a massive bodge solution for those who have been crying how Lycoris has no content, not realizing Lycoris is not a live service game like Fortnite. It's a single player, story driven game. It's not meant to be your hobby for the upcoming 2 years for every single day of your life. This is a prime example of entitled players who expect something that was never promised, causing a massive issue with how much they cried online. The reason for the 2-week rotation is to simply bring you back into the game after 2 weeks with something of an objective, because these people want this single player story driven game to be their daily hobby non-stop. It's like expecting the one Big Mac you just purchased from McDonald's to last you for an entire month and then complaining about it when you finished it in one sitting. So now, McDonald's is just giving you the Big Mac in tiny pieces over multiple meals, leading you to remain starved for more, and the overall content losing value because a single bite a day is utterly worthless on its own. But that mini rant about entitled players out of the way, the other addition is obviously the Reaper quote-unquote mini raid, let's say. It's the Reaper boss from the story appearing in a pseudo raid, and I call it a mini raid because it doesn't have a map on its own like the actual raids we have, and to be honest, I don't mind this at all. The raids have been so bare bones due to the lack of proper mechanics that all of them basically devolved into ignore everything in the map / speedrun objectives that are nothing more than flip a switch, reach the boss, fight the boss. So all in all, if the raids are going to be so creatively bankrupt to begin with, we may as well just have a boss fight instead of what Lycoris calls a raid. At least I get put into action right away rather than slogging me through all those meaningless corridors. But just like the previously mentioned additions, this Reaper raid is also designed to bridge the gap for casual players. It even has proper tutorials showing up on your screen on how to do the raids, which is just so funny to me considering the actual raids have been in the game for months. Either way, the boss is no pushover for the hardcore players, but a decent challenge for casuals where they can obtain different stat rolls of the Reaper Divine Armor and weapon for Sinon. And yes, they are locked to Sinon only. Again, one of the reasons why I believe these free DLCs are just a Divine Object Collectathon is that they'll become relevant in the second paid DLC. Each time you defeat the Reaper, its level will go up by 1, and the Reaper will only respawn after a full hour, so you cannot spam it back to back. It will stop leveling up at level 100. But the Reaper is actually affected by the difficulty setting of your game, so if you are that hungry for a challenge, just set the difficulty to Death Game and the level of the Reaper will go up accordingly. To sum it all up, this has been an incredible free DLC in my opinion in general terms, albeit a little disappointing or extremely disappointing depending on your point of view for that 1% of players. A compact story that doesn't overstay its welcome due to extreme busy work, featuring phenomenal voice acting and character portrayal along with live 2D sprite implementation, and a way that allows players to get more powerful, making it possible for a lot more players to be able to go into normal and EX raids to explore more of what the game has to offer. But that's been my impression on Art Online Alicization Lycoris' first free DLC, Ancient Apostles Chapter 1 Reaper of the Woods. A video focusing on future schedule for Alicization Lycoris DLCs will come tomorrow, so for all of that and more, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon for more in-depth Art Online coverage and news. That was a bit repetitive, but do consider becoming a channel member to get access to special badge and exclusive emotes to use. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook for faster news access, 50k special merch available on my Teespring page, and a huge thanks to all my patrons and channel members as usual. Until next time, keep your head